year was 2050, and the world had succumbed to a relentless ice age. The surface of the earth was a desolate wasteland, a frozen expanse where life had ceased to exist. The sun's rays were but a distant memory, swallowed by perpetual grey skies and swirling snowstorms. The remnants of humanity had retreated underground, carving out shelters in the bowels of the earth, where they clung to life in subterranean enclaves known as pits. Pit 13 was one such refuge. Nestled deep beneath the ice, it was a sprawling network of tunnels and chambers, a bleak haven for the few hundred souls who called it home. The walls were lined with ice that seemed to creep ever closer, threatening to encase the pit in a crystalline tomb. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and human fear, a constant reminder of their precarious existence. John Drake, a 50-year-old ex-military soldier, had become the de facto leader of Pit 13. His rugged features bore the scars of battles fought both above and below ground. His eyes, once a steely blue, now reflected the cold desolation of the world outside. He moved with the practiced grace of a man who had seen too much and survived against all odds. To the people of Pit 13, he was a beacon of hope and resilience, a guardian in their darkest hour. John's quarters were a small utilitarian space carved into the rock, a cot in one corner, a battered desk in another, and a single flickering light bulb that cast long shadows on the rough-hewn walls. He sat hunched over a map of the pit, marking out areas of concern and potential hazards. His 5-man security team was scattered throughout the tunnels, ensuring the safety of the inhabitants and maintaining order. The pit's limited resources were a constant worry. Food and medicine were rationed carefully, each day's supply calculated to the last morsel and pill. The cold seeped into everything, and the generators that provided heat and light were aging and unreliable. John knew that any major malfunction could spell disaster for them all. As he studied the map, a soft knock echoed through the chamber. He looked up to see Amelia, a young woman in her early 20s, standing in the doorway. She was one of the pit's few medics, her once bright eyes now dulled by fatigue and worry. Her voice a whisper in the oppressive silence. "John, there's something you need to see." He nodded and rose from his chair, his joints protesting the movement. Together, they navigated the narrow tunnels, their breath visible in the frigid air. The tunnel walls seemed to close in around them, the ice glittering like malevolent diamonds. Amelia led him to a chamber near the edge of the pit, where a small group had gathered. Their faces were etched with fear and uncertainty, their eyes darting nervously. In the center of the room lay a body, covered with a thin, blood-stained sheet. John felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. He knelt beside the body and pulled back the sheet. The sight that greeted him was grotesque. The man's ears had been torn off, his chest cavity savagely ripped open, and his heart was missing. Bite marks covered his flesh, and chunks of skin had been gnawed away. John's stomach churned, but he forced himself to remain composed. "Who is he?" John asked, his voice steady despite the horror before him. "Thomas Jenkins," Amelia replied. "He was one of the engineers." John cursed under his breath. Engineers were crucial to the pit's survival, responsible for maintaining the generators and the fragile life support systems. Losing one was a severe blow. But the manner of his death was even more alarming. "There are no animals down here," John said. "What the hell did this?" No one had an answer. Fear and confusion hung in the air, thick as the cold. John stood and addressed the group. "We need to find out what happened. I want this area secured and no one goes anywhere alone. We stick together. Understand?" The group nodded, though their eyes were filled with doubt. As they dispersed, John turned to Amelia. "Get a team together and start an autopsy. I need to know what we're dealing with." Amelia hesitated. John watched her leave, a sense of dread settling in his gut. Pit 13 was supposed to be their sanctuary, a place where they could wait out the Ice Age. But now, something had shattered that fragile peace, something monstrous. As he made his way back to his quarters, John couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something terrible. The pit's narrow tunnels seemed more claustrophobic than ever, the walls closing in around him. He had faced many threats in his lifetime, but this was different. The cold reality of their situation was becoming clear. Survival in Pit 13 was not just a matter of managing resources and maintaining order. There was a new, insidious threat lurking in the shadows, one that threatened to unravel everything they had fought so hard to preserve. John Drake was a man of action, a soldier who had faced death countless times. But as he lay in his cot that night, listening to the distant hum of the generators and the muffled whispers of the other pit dwellers, he couldn't help but feel a profound sense of unease. The darkness seemed to press in from all sides, and for the first time in a long while, John felt truly afraid. The cold reality of their existence was harsher than ever, and the battle for survival had just begun. The days blurred together in the dim, cold corridors of Pit 13. John Drake moved through them like a ghost, his thoughts consumed by the grotesque discovery of Thomas Jenkins' body. The pit's inhabitants whispered rumors in hushed tones, their fear growing with each passing hour. The tension was palpable, a living thing that seemed to slither through the tunnels, coiling around the pit's fragile sense of security. John had called an emergency meeting in the central chamber, a cavernous space that served as both a gathering hall and a mess area. The room was filled with the quiet murmuring of worried voices, the flickering lights casting long shadows on the ice-covered walls. John stood at the front, his face grim, his eyes scanning the crowd. He saw fear, anger, and confusion in equal measure. "We have a problem," he began, his voice carrying through the chamber. "As you all know, Thomas Jenkins was found dead yesterday, and his body showed signs of a violent attack. This is unlike anything we've faced before. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. John raised a hand for silence. I've instructed Amelia and her team to conduct an autopsy. We need to understand what killed Thomas and whether it poses a threat to the rest of us. Until we know more, I'm implementing strict security measures. No one goes anywhere alone, and we stick to the main tunnels. If you see anything unusual, report it immediately. Bill Crossman, the previous leader of Pit 13, stepped forward. His gaunt face was twisted into a sneer, his eyes burning with malice. "This wouldn't have happened under my watch," he spat. "You're leading us to ruin, John. Maybe it's time for a change in leadership." John met Bill's gaze steadily. "This isn't the time for petty disputes, Bill. We need to work together to keep everyone safe." Bill scoffed, but said nothing more. He retreated into the crowd, his expression murderous. John knew that Bill's animosity ran deep, and he suspected that the former leader would seize any opportunity to undermine him. But now was not the time to dwell on that. There were more immediate threats to address. After the meeting, John sought out Amelia in the makeshift infirmary. The air was thick with the smell of antiseptic and fear. Amelia was bent over a table, her hands stained with blood, her face a mask of concentration. She looked up as John entered, her eyes weary. "We've completed the autopsy," she said, "and it's worse than we thought." John braced himself. "Tell me." "Thomas didn't just die from the attack. He was infected with something, a virus or a parasite, we're not sure yet. But whatever it is, it's highly contagious. His wounds show signs of rapid necrosis, and his organs were in an advanced state of decay. It's spreading fast, John." John felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "How many others have shown symptoms?" Amelia hesitated. "3 so far. I've isolated them, but we don't have the resources to deal with an outbreak of this magnitude. If it spreads, we're looking at a full-scale epidemic." John swore under his breath. "We need to find the source of the infection and contain it. Any idea where it came from?" Amelia shook her head. "No, but it's spreading through contact. We need to enforce strict quarantine protocols. Anyone showing symptoms needs to be isolated immediately." John nodded. "I'll see to it. Keep me updated on any developments." As he left the infirmary, John's mind raced. The situation was rapidly spiraling out of control. The infection, the violence, it all pointed to something far more sinister than they had ever faced. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. John decided to visit the security hub, a small room filled with monitors and equipment salvaged from the old world. His second-in-command, Marcus, was hunched over a console, his face illuminated by the cold blue glow of the screens. "Marcus, I need you to pull up the footage from the past week," John said. "Anything that might give us a clue about what's going on." Marcus nodded and began typing furiously. The screens flickered to life, displaying a series of grainy images from the pit's surveillance cameras. John watched intently, scanning for any sign of unusual activity. They saw the daily routines of the pit's inhabitants, people moving through the tunnels, gathering for meals, going about their lives. But then something caught John's eye. A shadowy figure moving stealthily through the tunnels, slipping in and out of view. It was Bill. "Pause it there," John said, pointing to the screen. "Zoom in." The image sharpened, revealing Bill's face twisted in a mask of rage and desperation. He was carrying something, a small cylindrical object. John's heart sank as he realized what it was. "He's been sabotaging the generators," John said. "He's trying to undermine everything we've built." Marcus looked at him, his eyes wide. "What do we do?" John straightened, his resolve hardening. "We confront him. Now." He gathered his security team and made his way to Bill's quarters. The tunnels seemed to close in around him, the walls pressing in with a palpable sense of dread. He could hear the whispers of the pit's inhabitants, the fear and uncertainty that had taken root in their hearts. They reached Bill's quarters and found him sitting on his cot, his face pale and gaunt. He looked up as they entered, a sneer curling his lips. "Come to gloat, John?" he asked. "Enough, Bill," John said. "We know what you've been doing, sabotaging the generators, spreading fear and chaos. Why?" Bill's sneer faltered, replaced by a flicker of fear. "You don't understand," he said. "I had to do it. It's the only way to survive." John stepped closer, his eyes blazing. "Survive? You're killing us, Bill. You're dooming us all." Bill's fear turned to rage. "You think you can save them? You're a fool, John. The infection is already here. We're all going to die down here, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." John felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" Bill's eyes gleamed with a mad light. "I saw it, John. I saw what it does. It changes you, makes you something else, something monstrous. And it's already too late." John's heart pounded in his chest. The infection, the attacks, it was all connected. And now they were facing a horror beyond anything they had ever imagined. "We're not giving up," John said, his voice steady. "We'll find a way to stop it." Bill laughed, a hollow, mirthless sound. "You can't stop it. You can only delay the inevitable. We're all going to become monsters, John, just like me." John felt a surge of determination. He turned to his team. "Take him to the isolation chamber. We need to keep him contained." As they led Bill away, John couldn't shake the feeling that their time was running out. The infection was spreading, and the pit was descending into chaos. But he was not ready to give up. He would fight to the last breath to save the people of Pit 13. As he walked through the tunnels, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, John knew that the battle for survival had only just begun. The shadows in the depths were closing in, and the real horror was yet to come. The gloom of Pit 13 seemed to thicken with each passing hour. John Drake's mind churned with the weight of the growing crisis. The air was heavy, not just with the stale breath of humanity, but with the creeping tendrils of fear that snaked through the subterranean corridors. John stood in the central control room, his eyes scanning the flickering monitors. Each screen showed a different part of the pit, the barracks, the mess hall, the infirmary. The cameras captured the haunted faces of the pit's inhabitants, survivors clinging to a fragile hope, unaware of the true horrors lurking just beyond their sight. Amelia entered the room, her face pale and drawn. Her usual calm demeanor was cracking under the pressure of their dire situation. "John, we have another one," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. John's heart sank. "Who?" "Tom Willis," she replied. "He was found near the storage room, the same bite marks, the same missing organs." John cursed under his breath. Tom had been one of the younger members of Pit 13, full of energy and hope. His brutal death was another nail in the coffin of their dwindling morale. "We need to quarantine the area," John said, his voice steely with determination. "I want a full sweep of the pit. Nobody goes anywhere alone." Amelia nodded, but her eyes betrayed her fear. "John, if this continues, we'll have a panic on our hands. People are already talking about the curse, about the pit being haunted." "Let them talk. Right now, we need to focus on finding out who or what is responsible for these attacks," John said. As Amelia left to coordinate the quarantine, John turned back to the monitors. He knew the pit like the back of his hand, but now it felt like a labyrinth of shadows, hiding secrets he couldn't fathom. And at the heart of it all was Bill Crossman. Bill had always been a thorn in John's side, a relic of the pit's darker days. When John had taken over as leader, he'd hoped to leave that past behind. But now, with Bill's escape and the brutal murders, it seemed the past had come back with a vengeance. John gathered his security team, Marcus, Elena, Sam and Lewis, in the control room. They were his best, each one hand-picked for their loyalty and skills. "We have to find Bill," John said, his voice firm. "He's our prime suspect. If he's behind these attacks, we need to stop him before anyone else gets hurt." Marcus, a tall man with a military bearing, nodded. "We'll find him, John. But what if he's changed, like the others?" John met Marcus's gaze, the unspoken fear hanging in the air between them. "Then we deal with him like any other threat. No hesitation." The team geared up and set out into the tunnels, their footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. The deeper they went, the more the darkness seemed to close in, as if the pit itself were alive and hungry. They searched for hours, combing through every inch of the underground complex. As they neared the old storage rooms, the air grew colder, and the stench of decay became almost unbearable. John signaled for the team to stop. "We split up here. Marcus, you and Eleanor take the west side, Sam and Louise the east. I'll check the central chamber. Stay in contact." The team nodded and moved out, their flashlights slicing through the darkness. John felt a chill run down his spine as he made his way to the central chamber. The room had once been a hub of activity, but now it was a desolate space, filled with the remnants of a past long forgotten. He stepped into the chamber, his flashlight casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant drip of water from the ceiling. As he moved deeper into the room, he caught sight of something glinting in the darkness. John approached cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. It was a makeshift shrine, a grotesque display of bones and rotting flesh. At its center lay a crude idol, fashioned from human remains. His stomach churned at the sight, but he forced himself to examine it more closely. The bones were arranged in a twisted parody of reverence, and the idol's hollow eye sockets seemed to stare back at him with malevolent intent. A sound behind him made him spin around, his flashlight sweeping the room. There, in the shadows, stood Bill, Crossman. His eyes were wild, his face gaunt and twisted with madness. "Bill," John said, his voice steady, despite the fear gnawing at his insides. "What have you done?" Bill laughed, a hollow, eerie sound that echoed through the chamber. "I've seen the truth, John. The pit demands sacrifice. It hungers for flesh, for blood." John tightened his grip on his weapon. "You're sick, Bill. We can help you, but you need to stop this." Bill's eyes gleamed with a manic light. "Help me? There's no help for us, John. We're all damned. The pit has chosen its path, and so have I." With a sudden, feral cry, Bill lunged at John. The two men grappled in the darkness, their struggle a desperate dance of life and death. John could feel Bill's strength, fueled by madness and whatever dark power had taken hold of him. In the chaos, John's flashlight was knocked from his hand, plunging the room into near total darkness. He fought blindly, relying on his training and instincts to keep Bill at bay. With a final, desperate effort, John managed to throw Bill off balance. He grabbed his fallen flashlight and turned it on, illuminating Bill's contorted face. For a moment, time seemed to freeze as they stared at each other, the air heavy with the weight of unspoken horrors. Then, with a guttural roar, Bill charged again. But this time John was ready. He sidestepped the attack and brought the butt of his flashlight down on Bill's head with all his might. Bill crumpled to the ground, unconscious. John stood over him, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The pit was silent once more, but the echoes of madness lingered in the air. John secured Bill's hands with a length of rope and called for his team. As they arrived, their faces etched with concern, John knew that this was only the beginning. The darkness in Pit 13 ran deeper than any of them had imagined, and their fight for survival was far from over. Thanks for sipping tonight's tale with Haunted Brew. Don't forget to subscribe, and sleep tight if you still can.